President, members of the Waterford Institute of Technology governing body, members of the Academic Council of the Institute, colleagues and friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my very great honour to welcome you to this evening's event, the inaugural Professorial lecture by Professor Michael Howlett. This is an historic event for WIT and for the School of Humanities, as well as, of course, for Professor Howlett himself and his friends, colleagues and family. And notwithstanding the robes and or the plumage, as one of my colleagues called it a minute ago, and the solemnity of the procession and all of that, this is an evening of joy and celebration as we honour Professor Howlett and recognise his very great contribution to this institute and indeed to the country. And I think in the process also honour the wider academy within WIT and its contribution to the region and to higher education in the state. I want to begin proceedings by calling on the President of Waterford Institute of Technology, Dr. Rory Nevin, to say a few words of introduction.
Thank you very much, Richard, and Fáilte Acharja Anocht. You're very welcome here tonight. This is our second evening in the Professorial Public Lecture Series, and to explain to everyone, it is a very, very important lecture series for this institute. I think it reflects, I suppose, the level of development that we see in this organisation, the level of professionalism that we see within our academic community, and the level of achievement that we see within our academic community. And this is what this evening is about. It's about celebrating achievement, and in particular academic achievement, and academic achievement displayed by Michael and others, but in particular, this is Michael's evening, we said that to him earlier on, this is his evening, to celebrate his achievement in what he has done in terms of academic development for not just WIT, but for the academic community he would share in Ireland Incorporated, if I could put it that way. What can I say about Michael and his work? Well, he's going to tell us all about his work. I'm going to avoid that bit because I'm not an expert in that. I'm afraid of a science background and it's all black and white for me, but I'm quite sure from the description of the talk this evening that there will be a little bit of grey in that. I'm hoping anyway there'll be some grey, but if it was me it'd be all black and white. But what I do want to say about Michael is that we genuinely are honoured to be able to share in the celebration of his work, and the Institute is honoured to be able to award him the honorary title of Professor. We're delighted to be able to do that. It is something that we fought hard for, and we are very proud to be able to acknowledge that here this evening in this Professor Michael Howlett's first public lecture. What I do want to say about Michael on a personal level is not only is he a scholar, and I have to say he's genuinely a scholar, I also believe, and I've only been here a few years, I have to say he's a true gentleman, and I think you can genuinely say he's a gentleman and a scholar. So, all I'm going to say is I'm looking forward to it, and I won't say any more because it's not me you want to hear, it is Professor Michael Howlett, making bad, making good, educating for identity from local to global. And I think we'll hand over to Michael on that. Might be an introduction from Richard. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, President. Just a very few words for myself first. The role of the Professor, as we know, is a very special role within the Academy, combining internationally recognised academic excellence with a very real public role. And the Professor must first and foremost profess, which involves, I think, a willingness to engage with public discourse in a way that many of us academics find challenging, but not so this evening's speaker. Professor Howlett has, as all of us who know him know, has for many years been a very actively engaged academic, actively engaged certainly in scholarly and professional academic societies and associations, and also certainly in publication and conferences of the highest international standard. He holds primary degrees in science and theology, and he was awarded a doctorate in theology by the Gregorian University in Rome in 1991, and a second doctorate, a PhD in English by UCD, NUI-UCD in 1998. He has published widely, including in Irish and international theological journals, And his publications include The Human Condition in the Writings of Patrick Kavanagh, a Theological Exploration, which was published in Rome in 1991. And in development at the moment, I suspect an extraordinary contribution to the field, The Wild Laugh, the Human Being, God's Risk in Patrick Kavanagh, which is in preparation at the moment, due for publication later this year. He is currently president of the Irish section of the European Society of Catholic Society, representing Ireland on the European Committee, and indeed engaged in very many other scholarly societies as well. Not only this, though, Michael is very deeply engaged in that public role of the professor as an advocate and public promoter of, in particular, the principles of social justice, of the necessity for social actors to consider the wider public good, what he calls quality of life, in determining social, cultural and economic policy and strategy. And I know this will form some part of this evening's reflections. Professor Howlett has long been reflecting on the necessity, particularly in post-Celtic Tiger Ireland, to take the broad view when it comes to designing the future for our country, and indeed closer to home, the future for our education system. And he's been a leader nationally, through his roles on various national bodies indeed, in developing what you might call a post-economic view of our present crisis and future opportunities. The professor's role involves not only engagement with the wider public, but of course engagement with the community within the institution. And Professor Howlett has of course contributed immeasurably to the development of WIT, particularly in his role as head of the Department of Applied Arts for many years. And it's no coincidence that most of the top recruiting undergraduate programs in the Institute have emanated from the Department of Applied Arts under his leadership. He has also been responsible for leading innovation in course design, and again under his leadership and direction, WIT has become a leader in inter and multidisciplinary education, in particular in Ireland. Professor Howlett has also directed the Creativity and Culture Research Group at WIT, which has acted as a focal point for much research activity within humanities and has attracted a significant number of graduate students. And Professor Howlett has forged strong strategic alliances with a number of important European and American universities, and has created very exciting opportunities for students and staff that will be incredibly important to humanities and to WIT into the future. Finally, the professor's role extends beyond these more obvious things, beyond demonstrating excellence and disseminating knowledge and expertise. I think the impact of the professor is also felt in interpersonal ways, and here being a professor demands a particular kind of personality. Professor Howlett combines scholarly rigour, a real desire for engagement across the academic community and society at large, with a very deep commitment to public service that is visible in his loyalty to this organisation, to his colleagues, and the depth of his reflections on institutional matters and the vigour with which he debates them amongst colleagues, formally and informally. He is a fine example to the rest of us, and so many of his colleagues and friends have learned a great deal from his example. He displays for me what is core to professing, which is not just in the spoken word, but in offering that positive example for others to follow. And he has been a mentor to me, and I know to many of those of us who are here this evening. And while we're here to listen to his words of wisdom, these words we know are supported by a desire for an equal commitment to action. So to speak on making bad, making good, educating for identity from local to global, it's a great privilege and delight for me personally and on behalf of the school and the wider academic community in WIT to introduce Professor Michael Howlett.
President Richard, members of the governing body, academic council, and the academic community and the rest of the community here in WIT, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm not really sure what I should be saying after all that. Not really sure if I recognise myself in it, and if I do, I have an awful lot more to do to get up to that level of activity and wisdom that Richard has just outlined there. So I thought it was going to be something that might lead me quietly into retirement in a couple of years' time. But I think I have a lot more to do before I get there. This is a very big honour for me to be awarded this title of Professor. And I'd like to think that it was because of all the rest of you that are here this evening and others besides that have helped me become what I am today. From the time I grew up in the small village of Newbourne, which was hardly recognisable as a village at the time, the teachers I had there, along with my own family, my mother and father, and particularly a teacher called Tom Butler, who was a very gentle type of teacher. And I learned a lot from him anyway. I don't know what anybody else learned or whether my sisters and brothers learned anything or not. But from him I learned a lot. And similarly with my teachers in St. Peter's College in Wexford, I learned a lot from them. And as I went through college doing science in Maynooth, Rory, so I'm not, we haven't got that less uncommon at all. And when I studied in theology in Rome, all these were mind-opening experiences for me. And I learned from everybody that I met, whether it was at college or school or university, and people outside, the human experience was something that I really value. And all the, not just the books, but also the enjoyment and the fun and in bars and other places that students attend and spend their time, maybe more than they should. But these are experiences where we learn a lot about life, and I certainly learned a lot about life. And when I came to work in WIT, I found it a great place to work and to learn as well. I learned a lot from all the lecturers here, from the different faculties, different schools. What they had to say, not just about the place, but their own subjects as well. And that's what I found very interesting about here, and long may it continue. My colleagues, particularly in the Department of Applied Arts, but also in the Business School, Engineering, Humanities, Architecture, and also the people in the administrative area, particularly in the research unit. And the schools, and in our own Office of Humanities in both College Street and here, and right throughout the Institute, everybody, from the porters and Frank Herity and his crew and all those. These were people I learned something from, everybody. So I'm very grateful to everybody, and the people outside, my neighbours at home. Francis, I see you're there, and other people, wherever I was able to go, I was able to learn something. There was hardly any experience that I didn't learn something from. So I'm very grateful to you all. And I take this honour as an honour for you as well. And maybe we all just become professors then. But sharing of knowledge, I believe, is one of the most important things we can do as human beings. So anyway, making bad, making good, educating for identity from local to global. Now that's a very big area, and I'm not going to be able to talk about everything this evening, because I'm sure you don't want to be here till 4 o'clock in the morning, because I could keep going on that long if somebody didn't stop me. Anyway, I studied Patrick Kavanagh, as Richard has already mentioned, for my doctorate. Now, that was a really eye-opener for me as well. And I found him very inspiring. And that's what I find in learning, that inspiration is what is most important. And it not just gets you thinking, but gives you new ideas as well. And that's what we want. And that's what Kavanagh was on about as well. He says, this country is dead or dying of its false materialism. Where the mistake is made is in seeing life as a purely material thing. And he wrote that in his short-lived Kavanagh's Weekly in 1952. Included in the list of symptoms of death are an inability to think and the depreciation of thinking and reflecting, financial greed, emigration, sensational vulgarity, romanticised Irishness, the stupidity and mediocrity of politicians who offer no integrative vision, and a religion that has not the energy to carry meaning because its core, spirituality, has run dry. You would think he was talking about today, wouldn't you? So his comments remain as valid right now. So what are the changes and developments that have taken place in Ireland during the last, say, 15 years? The boom and post-boom. Ireland moved from being a very closed economy in the late 1950s to being a very open economy and society in the 1990s. With rapid economic growth and a culture of greed has emerged more conspicuously in flaunted materialism, white-collar crime and tax evasion. There is a sense of commodity fetishness. Company logos and labels are especially in fashion. When Ireland was economically rich, with low unemployment in the Celtic Tiger years, the gap between the contented rich and the socially excluded was still getting wider. A substantial section of the population were not participating in the boom. They could not be part of a society which demands of them what they have not got and does not allow them to achieve even a fraction of their potential. Material wealth ruptured the community. The founding myths were no longer needed, and so the story took a different turn. There also has been a shift in the centre of power from the Roman Catholic Church, and as such, the latter is no longer the centre of the coordinates of identity. At one time, the chief influence in the state, then the state briefly asserted itself, quietly imitating the authoritarianism of the Church, and then the media becomes the most influential institution in the country, also imitating authoritarianism, as it sets the agenda in politics and have colonised it to a large extent. Consequently, political institutions have lost authority, authenticity and credibility. Voter turnouts have been declining, usually less than 2/3 in general elections and less in others, and a growing number of citizens are regarding government as less important and less useful in their lives. Apathy towards democracy, as we know it, is dominant. Culturally, the main influence in society as a carrier of meaning is the media, having taken over from both religion and education. The presence and power of the media is pervasive, invasive, and ubiquitous, particularly in social media and the advertising that's therein. Celebrity culture has produced doubtful role models for the younger generations. They have been particularly influential, the media, particularly influential in moving from an exclusively Irish culture, where Catholicism and Gaelic language and culture were closely linked in recognised Irish identity, to an increasingly pluralist and relativist culture, an information society that, despite its pluralist tendencies, is becoming more globally uniform. And we take, for example, McDonald's, nearly around every corner now, high street shops and department stores and hotel chains, and you wouldn't know the difference you wouldn't know which country you were in if you went into one of them. As a multicultural society, Ireland is still in the initial stages, yet it has been problematic in managing and dealing with the issues arising. As Irish society has become more individualistic and private, there is consequently less bonding between people, a weakening of social relationships on the individual and personal level and between communities, and less emphasis on community. It has resulted in more competitiveness, more success and failure, more greed, less social conscience, though Irish people are still good at giving charity. Longer working hours have made the pace of life hectic, as there is no time to do the important things, taking time and space for oneself and looking after health. No time for thinking and critical reflection. Little space is given to imagination and creativity. Everyone is just too busy. Too much generally useless information is in our faces, and often we don't have the skills to deal with it and critique it. There is a sense of urgency coupled with anxiety, with little sense of direction or destination. There are also very many, a majority, who are excluded from creating meaning in Irish society. Anyone not applauded by the high druids of the media, together with those who cannot subscribe to material superficiality of society, is excluded. Institutional religion is in decline and has made its own contribution to the identity crisis. Yet there is a hunger for spirituality, which is being met in mostly consumerist fashion at market and private level through the proliferation of books of health and life skills coaches, consultancy gurus, most of which are of the self-help type and promote individualism. This decline has been aided by the absence of a discursive tradition in Ireland, particularly in Catholicism. Questions that should have been asked were not. The new, instant and immediate, like the pop-up, is valued over tradition. There is complete rupture rather than continuity and little sense of history. Values in human dignity and centrality of communities seem to have taken a backseat, not just in society, but also in religious institutions. Following the culture of greed, have we become more interested in equality and fraternity and aligned with the common good? We still have questions about policies around reducing taxes, public spending, and the role of the state in society, taking a short-term rather than a longer-term focus. Interest in liberty is mostly self-interest. Belief is in the power of the marketplace to govern everything. Government policy has become accommodated to the beliefs of the contented and the powerful of various kinds. There's also been a demographic shift from rural to urban and suburban and dormitory towns. Dublin, the capital city, accounts for 1/3 of the country's population, surely an imbalance which has numerous consequences. Decentralisation to the provinces has been minimal. Poor infrastructure is a cause of this imbalance. In fact, recently, centralisation around Dublin rather than regional development, so that towns in the southeast are seen as commuter towns for Dublin, by some people at least. There is a loss of community sense by people and a hunger for its development, yet no new structures have developed to take account of new work and housing patterns where people live. The consequences for voluntary work, upon which Irish society thrived and people sensed some human fulfilment, and the environment are already apparent, though voluntary work has not disappeared and indeed is making a welcome return. Materialism and individualism mean less bonding, fewer relationships, and many of lower quality, loneliness and lives of quiet desperation. There is concern for social and environmental issues, but it's still often within the culture of contentment. So this is changing too. We have to. However, through raising the problems Irish society is encountering at the moment, a number of Irish strengths and potential ought to be noted. Firstly, there is a spiritual hunger among people which cannot be ignored by mainline churches for any longer, who, through their missions, could help feed this hunger by opening up the richness of the spiritual traditions of the local and the region, in Ireland here and in Europe. And I'm not talking about ultramontanism, which happened from the 1850s on. And beyond these borders, accompanied by encouraging dialogue among the various world religions. Secondly, and connected with the first, is the search for authenticity among the same people, required of leaders particularly and in the modern icons and those who would bid them follow. Thirdly, there is a strong desire among people for relationships and a community context to support them. And finally, there is a growing support for a genuine care of the environment and the planet. This would serve to indicate that Irish people want to move beyond the perfection of the machine towards a society that promotes true human fulfillment, a society that is structured in such a way as to promote right relationships so that human rights are respected, human dignity is protected, human development is facilitated, and the environment is respected and protected. And that comes from Social Justice Ireland, which I'm very happy to be involved with and has shaped my thinking over the years as well, and I thank them for that, Sean Healy and Bridget Reynolds. All of the foregoing and more is shaping identity in Ireland, also locally, regionally, Euro-wide and globally at the moment. Can we probe a little as to what this identity is? What are the dimensions of, say, European identity? Is a religious dimension included? What can be said about being Irish, Polish, English, Italian, French, German, and so on? When the various identities are all put together, as with the European Union, what is the result? Or can it even be done? When I say I am a European, what does that mean? Perhaps asking the question, what does it mean to be British for an English person, or a Welsh person, or a unionist in Northern Ireland may help. What about asking the same question of a nationalist in Northern Ireland? Attempting to explore these questions may offer some clues about identity at various levels. Now, I'm not going to answer all those questions tonight, though I'd love to dialogue with you about those and people from those countries as well. Almost 30 years ago, just prior to the European elections at that time, when such elections were a novelty, I was asked by a reporter for a local newspaper in Wexford if I were going to vote in these elections. I replied I was a committed European. At least I think I did, as it was printed as a caption under my photograph in the paper the following week in a feature devoted to the elections. Everyone in Wexford, at least those who read the paper, knew what I was, a committed European. However, when I went to vote on polling day, I discovered I was not registered. What a shock. The committed European could not vote in the European elections. While accepting the humorous side of my European disenfranchisement, I did feel that something had evaded me, or I had missed out on something that was significant and personal to me. My European dimension could not be expressed by casting my vote. Whatever about Europe needing me, I felt the need of Europe. And that leads me on to Patrick Kavanagh. During the latter half of World War II years, Kavanagh composed his long poem, Loch Derg. There is one line which haunts the reader as it stands out and shouts amid the banal piety of the pilgrims of the island of Loch Derg. He says, and I quote, "All Ireland froze for the want of Europe." It seems to cry out that there is more to this life and society than what the isolationist policy of the Irish government was offering to its people during the war years. It is a cry for the other, for solidarity with the suffering of Europe. It also tunes in with John Donne's well-known line, "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent and a part of the main." It seems to say our identity needs and deserves more than what Irish society and culture were offering, even though the war was not taking place in Ireland, but it was affecting the Irish people. Here we are talking about Ireland's identity and Europe's identity. Following on the point being made in Kavanagh's poem, there is not another to tell us what we are missing and what we are like. So we need the other for developing identity. This point is made in Joyce's Ulysses. In the first episode, as Stephen Dedalus looks at his reflection in the cracked mirror, while reminded of Robert Burns' line, "Wish for the power to see ourselves as others see us." And the line in Joyce is, "As he and others see me." He wishes he could see himself as others see him. The other is involved in my identity, who seems to draw it out of me. Remaining with Joyce for the moment and opening his portrait of the artist as a young man, we find young Stephen in Clongowes College asserting himself as Irish, European and global, or universal, as he writes his identity in the form of his name and address on his geography book. And he writes, "Stephen Dedalus, Class of Elements, Clongowes Wood College, Sallins, County Kildare, Ireland, Europe, the world, the universe." So all those identities rippling out from Sallins, from Clongowes Wood College right up to the end of the universe. I think a lot of us did things like that when we were in boarding school, didn't we? Later on in a portrait, when Stephen started at university, he encounters his Dean of Studies one day, and they had a philosophical discussion, mostly about Aquinas and beauty. The Dean is an English convert to Roman Catholicism and had become a Jesuit. During the course of the discussion, reflecting on the Dean's accent and his nationality, the thought occurs to Stephen, and I quote, "The language in which we are speaking is his before it is mine. How different are the words home, ale, Christ, master, on his lips and on mine. I cannot speak or write these words without unrest of spirit. His language so familiar and so foreign will always be for me an acquired speech. I have not made or accepted his words. My voice holds them at bay. My soul frets in the shadow of his language." Stephen, whose mother's tongue is English, is aware of the difference and of identities expressed through language, particularly one's native language and its traditions and culture. Identity is deep within culture and is carried by language linked to its place of origin. True materialism for Kavanagh, on the other hand, is what is based on realities, which brings in an enthusiasm for life, which itself is a sort of madness, something out of the transcendent imagination. The energetic reality of life comes from the imagination. Allowing it to roam through our being gives us a new perspective on reality and identity. What does this mean, and how does Kavanagh understand the imagination and through it develop and grow identity? For Kavanagh, reality takes shape in a network of relationships in which every human being is involved with their environment. Its centre is man in this world. Each human being relates firstly to other human beings in this network, secondly to the material environment, and thirdly to the source of material and human creation, which the believer usually names as God. So we need to look at ourselves, as Kavanagh said, as human beings. What are human beings anyway? I'm just going to give you a little summary from my perspective. And I think it's there we have to start with everything. Human beings are created with a limited freedom, which may be interpreted negatively, but I would like to interpret it positively as a space to develop an empty space, as it were, to develop creatively by using the gifted imagination. With this freedom comes ethical responsibility, and the two cannot be separated. Like two sides of a coin, it is an openness to the self, to others, to the world around us and the environment, and has a transcendent dimension deriving from the spiritual dimension of the human being. This openness is also the origin of the social dimension, the element of belonging, the dimension which originates the I. And people like Martin Buber, Axel Honneth, and others have said something like, before there is an I, we are necessarily we. We are relational social selves. We relate to the environment and are dependent on it for survival and sustenance and sustainability. We are people of the earth and always have to have one foot on the ground. Otherwise, we are in orbit or stuck to it. We can have choices and make decisions to develop a meaningful and fulfilled life. We participate and collaborate with each other. We use our resources for the benefit of our relationships and the world in which we live. We are imperfect human beings in that we are in becoming, growing physically, spiritually, socially, and culturally, with the possibility to reach our potential of being fully human and flourish through the gifts of and through others and our environment and the historical circumstances in which we live. But we know from experience that lots of things and people even have a habit of getting in the way. So we are not totally independent, and the word autonomous suits better to our condition as human beings. We are participants in a society which contributes to our identity. The word's ecosystem may be relevant to our understanding of this process in the way everything is connected and dependent. Developing our full identity requires the support of orders, structures, and institutions. We need these at various levels of society, whether it be local, county, regional, national, European, and global. To reach a good quality of life standard, these structures are needed for the support of the development in our society for a good, harmonious, and balanced life, where life has meaning that goes beyond the superficial and the material and economic dominance. How do we balance the human dimension in the reality in which the human exists? How do we balance the dimensions social, political, economic, and cultural? The economic is dominant at the moment, and sometimes the political, the social a little bit, and down the line the cultural is hardly awake at times. And can we give the cultural some prominence? Leonardo Boff, the theologian from Brazil, South American liberation theologian, in a book on the essentials of care, if I remember it correctly, has articulated a vision of society. He says the issue of care serves as a critique of the agonizing situation of our civilization, but it also serves as an inspiring principle for a new paradigm of living together. And he says, I dream of a world that is still to come, a world where we will no longer need electronic devices with virtual beings in order to overcome our solitude and fulfill the human essence of care and kindness. I dream of a globalized society in the great common home of the earth, where structuring values are built around caring for people, and especially those who are culturally different, those who have been penalized by nature or by history, based on those who are needy and who have been excluded, the children, the elderly, the dying, based on care for plants, animals, landscapes that are dear to us, and especially care for our great and generous mother, the earth. I dream of a world in which care has been recognized as a fundamental ethos of the human being and as an indispensable compassion for all the beings in creation. And many visions for new society are similar to that. So what are the values and principles guiding our freedom and action in this vision? And for me, the inspiration would come from, and it's a quote from the Old Testament, one of the prophets of the Old Testament Bible, Micah, and it's those who read the Bible, I think, or biblical scholars will know it very well, from Micah chapter 6, verse 8. This is what Yahweh asks of you, and only this, to act justly, love tenderly, and walk humbly with your God. Human dignity is central to any justice or care vision, and seen as a harmony with personal and interpersonal dimensions, followed by values of equality and fairness to build relationships. Here, listening is an important value. And then we have human rights, respect for human rights, consisting, and there are 7 at least, that we have enough income, that we have meaningful work, accommodation that is appropriate, education that is relevant, healthcare that is essential, participation in society, and cultural respect. That means not just respecting our own culture, but that of others as well. Solidarity, that is our duties to one another, shapers of our own destiny, and no domination, but at the same time making space for leadership. And sustainability to keep us going in hope. The common good is also very important. And often we find it difficult to say what the common good is. Rawls, in his 1971 publication, A Theory of Justice, says it is certain general conditions that are equally to everyone's advantage. Gaudium et Spes is one of the documents of the final document of Vatican II. Said it is the sum of those conditions of social life by which individuals, families and groups can achieve their own fulfillment in a relatively thorough and ready way. The common good primarily consists in having the social systems, institutions and environments on which we all depend work in a manner that benefits all people simultaneously and in solidarity. Can it be shown that the common good has contributed to the overall well-being of society? I think it can. It requires a level of recognition of rights and responsibilities and empathy with others and values of citizenship. Other values that are important are tolerance of diversity, and hospitality is an important value and always has been traditionally in Irish culture. Openness as well. Openness to the other even and to ourselves. Truthfulness and integrity. Sharing our time, sharing what we have, sharing our joy and our sorrow. These are things that the Irish have been pretty good at and still are. Time, I think, should also be considered a value. Do we give ourselves enough time, or do we have to be working 24/7 every week? It's not good. When I'm working 24/7, I feel very much like a machine, and I don't want to feel like that very often, so I don't anymore. So time for oneself and for others and for place, and giving oneself a space that you can call your place. Okay, we do it for our kids, we give them their own room, but what do we give ourselves? Which part of the house is yours? We need to respect our own tradition and culture and value others' culture and traditions. Happiness and fulfillment. And one of the important things that Kavanagh taught me was to laugh at myself. And I'm going to read you a poem. I hope I'm not running over time. There's no timekeepers here. Everybody has left their watch outside. Kavanagh wrote, I'm going to quote two poems. The first one is A View of God and the Devil. And it's about having a good laugh at yourself and some of the pretentious around the place as well. I met God the Father in the street, and the adjectives by which I would describe him are these: amusing, experimental, irresponsible, about frivolous things. He was not a man who would be appointed to a board, nor impress a bishop or a gathering of art lovers. He was not splendid, fearsome, or terrible, yet not insignificant. This was my God who made the grass and the sun, and the stones in streams in April. This was the God I met in Dublin as I wandered the unconscious streets. This was the God that brooded over the harrowed field, Rooney's, beside the main Carrick Road, the day my first verses were printed. I knew him and was never afraid of death or damnation. And I knew that the fear of God was the beginning of folly. And now one for the devil. I met the devil too. And the adjectives by which I would describe him are these: solemn, boring, conservative. He was the man the world would appoint to a board. He would be on the list of appointees for a bishop's garden party. He would look like an artist. Sorry, Ger. He was the fellow who wrote in newspapers about music. I don't know who that refers to. Got into a rage when someone laughed. He was serious about unserious things, yet you had to be careful about his inferiority complex, for he was conscious of being uncreative. Passing on enhanced to the next generation the resources that must be cared for. Those are the economic, social, cultural, and environmental. And structural arrangements must be made to decide on these: who owns them, how they're used, how they're accumulated and distributed. And this is always disputed. But these arrangements have a major impact on how society is shaped and how it supports the well-being of its members in solidarity with others. Relating to the whole of creation, society and the environment, beyond our own community, the greatest threats at the moment are the many wars throughout the world, and every day we hear about wars, not just in the Middle East, but near enough here in Europe, in the Ukraine. And another important threat is that of global climate change, and then the various fundamentalisms which interpret them. These have replaced the nuclear arms race of about 25 years ago. Slow but effective pollution of the atmosphere, diminishing the quality of life, and causes suffering too. The pollution of the airwaves and the cyber world through advertising and by self-interest groups in the media, which diminish human dignity and force consciences to choose their value systems. Justice is the important value for oppressed peoples in unjust relationships. It requires a radical overturning of the values of this world. Others are liberated by these social justice values. The unity of community leads to the unity of mankind. This value of openness brings solidarity, hope, and progress. We appreciate our cultural roots and those of others, and those not just from the West. And spirituality is at the core of all these. So it's very important that we rediscover our spirituality and work on it. And I'm very glad to be involved with Bernadette Flanagan and Michael O'Sullivan in that regard. So education, this is my little paragraph on education. It's a lifelong process from childhood to old age of holistic self-discovery and identity formation that a human being undergoes, including these dimensions: cultural, physical, spiritual, mental, intellectual, personal, social, resourceful, skillful, imaginative, creative, reflective, innovative. Learning through life experience in all and every engagement and relationship, growing in and with the world and its environment which supports it. It's about achieving a sustainable quality of life shared with others in the community. This learning process is facilitated through teaching by formal and informal teachers who have journeyed that path already. And that brings us on then to the school system and the institutions at the 3 levels. And the system includes at least the curriculum, the examinations, and the method of teaching. You all know that anyway. But one problem in the education system for me is the abrupt disruption between first and second levels and second and third levels. There are no fluid continuities or transitions between the stages, in Ireland anyway. Can this change? Does politics interfere too much in education? And does economics interfere too much in education? And I'm just going to suggest that if we see education as a value and a right, and I'd like to parallel it to the way the justice system is, which is independent of the government, autonomous of the government, then it might be suggested that it should be independent of government too. I haven't given enough a thought yet to how that would be done, but it would make for less, hopefully, interference by the political establishment. Could its economy and decision-making process be devolved to the regions for all levels, with new governance structures elected at regional and local level? I'm thinking of the PPNs, or I've forgotten what it actually stands for, but it's, where the community and voluntary sector are involved in making or helping to make decisions. So, and that would help participation at a local level and help people feel and see that they are involved in the development of society and in education and in other areas as well. Such a development might help form local, regional, national and global identities as they build on each other. I'd just like, before I conclude, to look at the possibility of a European identity, which is something that I've been very interested in for a number of years. And one of the impulses for this, when myself and my late wife Kate adopted our son Florian, who is here listening to me this evening, probably giving out, wondering what the hell I'm talking about. But he was adopted from Romania and brought over here from the east of Europe to the west, from the extreme east to the extreme west. And what does it mean for us who are growing up in Europe? If it's to mean anything, what does it mean for European identity? And we all do have various identities, male, female, from the different teacher, farmer, accountant, or whatever. We are husbands, wives, children, sons, daughters, multiple identities that all merge together into one person. Teetotaler or drinker or whatever, socialist or capitalist, all these things. And often, these things conflict with each other. I'm not going to go into that, but just on the European level, with the development within Europe, and I think this started mainly under Jacques Delors, when he was the commissioner, the head honcho in Europe at the time, whom I think was somebody that could inspire a lot if we take him to heart. So what is Europe? We do not yet know what shape it's going to be or how it's going to turn out. Excuse me. There is uncertainty as to its borders in the east, but the north, south and west, there's no dispute there. But it is a space, a continent, with the adjective mainland attached to it at times, usually by those on its geographical margins, indicating the centre, a collection of countries, many of whom border each other and who share histories with their neighbours, but usually from opposite viewpoints. Some of these countries have been empires and colonisers, and others have been colonised, and even a few have been both. These countries have cultures with myths of origin and heroes, spiritual traditions, religions, symbols and rituals, values and languages, all of which may be related and even shared. It is also a collection of economies, markets and currencies, which are coming closer together and uniting. It is a collection of political groups who hold the reins of power in the various countries at different times. This power is also often accumulated or pooled for the benefit of those pooling. It is also importantly, a place where peoples live and have made it what it is today and will shape it into the future. At the core of its human life, people around whom culture, politics, economics and relationships revolve, and religion has been a central dimension, both positively and negatively, in its history, indeed up to this moment. And I don't mean just Christianity. Islam has been very much part of it as well, as of course Judaism has been, and some of the, what we might call the pagan religions too. All of the foregoing contribute to shaping European identity now and will do so into the future. Whatever the founding myths, stories and histories of the various peoples, along with their economies, languages, landscapes, seascapes, sufferings and triumphs, architecture and art, we are unable to apply the word European to any of them without knowing that only a part of Europe is referred to rather than the whole. Individual countries have their narratives, some of which may be shared to an extent. An attempt was made a number of years ago to write a history of Europe which would be used in the school's curriculum. I think it was in Germany and France that tried that. It did not get very far as I understand, because the project, in my opinion, started too far up the ladder of cultural development. In my opinion, it should have started with the obvious, the first step, which is the story, always new in the telling. The challenge for Europe today is to creatively imagine a European narrative, or European narratives, a collection of stories which all Europe can pool and share. It would certainly be easier on the ears and the eyes than a telephone book-sized blockbuster of a Lisbon Treaty full of jargon, necessary though it may be, and it would go straight to the heart of what it means to be European. What kind of project is being suggested here? What would go into an outline of such a pooling of narratives that Europeans would share to build up meaning and identity? In the end, I do not think it would look that much different, for example, in shape, though not necessarily in content, than the Judeo-Christian Bible, or any other collection of founding stories, myths and accounts of any groups that have developed identities. It might not look too different in terms of a model from the collection of the writings of James Joyce, who has already been referred to above, though I think you might have a nice little laugh at putting Finnegan's Wake, Ulysses, and Portrait and Dubliners together, not to talk of some of the other things he wrote. For example, we have, into the pool would go the epics and founding myths of the various tribes, empires long past, and nations. And we could take, for example, Beowulf from Britain, from England, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey from Greece, the Táin from Ireland, Nibelungenlied from Germany, the stories of Rome's foundation, and so on. The founding and important stories and myths of each country as told in their literature, poetry, folklore, symbols and rituals, music and art would be pooled. Let us not forget we are the island of saints and scholars. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to boast about our research. To conclude, I suggest the poem Epic by Patrick Kavanagh might be one Irish piece which could be pooled in the European Bible. An epic is a short 14-line sonnet. I have lived in important places, times, when great events were decided, who owned that half rood of rock, a no man's land, surrounded by our pitchfork-armed claims. I heard the Duffies shouting, "Damn your soul," and old McCabe, stripped to the waist, seen, stepped the plot, defying blue-cast steel. Here is the march along these iron stones. That was the year of the Munich bother. Which was more important? I inclined to lose my faith in Ballyrush and Gurton, till Homer's ghost came whispering to my mind. He said, I made the Iliad from such a local row. This sonnet captures two very local rows on two levels, the local one in Ballyrush and Gurteen and Troy of Homer's Iliad. Each of them is just of equal importance, according to the poet's revealed and considered wisdom. It is the one given epic recognition by Homer that in turn gives validity to the local event of the poet's time. For him, it became an event of great importance. But when placed side by side with the Munich Bother, that is, the events leading to the Second World War, the poet's certainty began to shake, but through the resources of the European tradition, Homer's ghost restored his faith in the local as the creator of meaning for the local through European culture over and against the destruction of the meaning of the local and of Europe by the Munich Bother. Such stories are ordinary and may be considered insignificant in a list of events, but the creative artist can expose its imaginative dimension and develop its significance, moving it from the personal and local to the greater European community, the stuff which may serve in creating a European identity and strengthen the local identity in the process. Thank you.
Well done, and thanks very much, Michael, for those very thought-provoking reflections. I should have added that one of the many gifts or many things required of the professor is a sort of geographical feel, or I think that the professor as geographer, professor as cartographer. I think we would all agree that Michael has given us a wonderful map, rich in detail, of our current predicament. And I'm also reminded of that line that is reprinted on the cover of all those Everyman library books from the medieval play Everyman. Everyman, I will go with thee and be thy guide. I think Michael has provided us with a route forward through this predicament. He's played the role of guide brilliantly, so that, like Stephen, I think we can position ourselves perfectly within the universe. So thank you, Michael, for a wonderfully thought-provoking set of comments and reflections. Unfortunately, the format of the evening doesn't allow for questions, but it does allow for refreshments, and we hope that the discussion and the fighting and all of that will continue, not the fighting, but the debate will continue outside. So it remains for me to thank you all for coming this evening to celebrate with us. I want to thank in particular the President, Rin Evan, and his office, and the Office of the Vice President for Research, Professor Willie Donnelly's office, particularly Marita and Rita, for all their hard work in putting the evening together. A lot of work has gone into this behind the scenes, and so we're very, very grateful to them for making the evening possible. I want to thank all of you from outside the Institute for travelling and for your support for WIT and for the School of Humanities. And I want to acknowledge the continued support of colleagues within WIT. But most of all, I want to thank Professor Howlett for this evening, to congratulate him again most sincerely on this well-deserved appointment, and to look forward to further provocative and stirring reflections in the future. Keep professing. So, thank you all and good evening.